It was the morning of my 31st birthday, though no one marked it, save the calendar on my phone blinking a tiny cake icon. I'd already been awake 4 hours, forcing my feet into worn steel-toe boots and pulling on the faded work shirt for another double shift at the auto shop because rent doesn't pause for birthdays and overdue bills don't send polite RSVPs. The shop's fluorescent lights buzzed as I clocked in 2 minutes early, partly out of habit and partly because I hated waiting. I'd barely logged onto my break room playlist when me screen lit up. A message from Mallory. My heart pinched. Anticipating a simple happy birthday, maybe a promise of leftover cake after her shift. A hug that didn't feel like an obligation. Instead, the words cut deeper than any wrench I'd turned all week. I sold your car. My family comes first. Be grateful I let you live here. My breath caught a sieve. I'd swallowed a shard of glass. It blinked, thinking it must be a joke. Maybe Orion's idea of twisted humor until the seconds ticked by without a follow-up emoji or explanation. Before I could compose a reply, another notification. Oh, and my brother Orion's college tuition is due, $5,200. You'll cover it. My phone felt heavier, a dead weight. I nearly dropped into the concrete floor. I stared at those numbers, $5,200 scraped together for his art history classes, while I scrambled to cover my own rent, utilities, groceries. I typed, not happening. The hammer blow landed almost immediately. Then pack your ass. You're dead to me. I sank against the cool metal locker, the echo of the message reverberating in my skull. My heart pounded, not with surprise. Hell, this storm had been brewing since I signed every utility bill, wired every tuition transfer, cleaned every dusty corner of the house. They treated like it was theirs, not mine, but with a fierce, hollow relief. I was done. My fingers trembled as I locked the phone and slid it into my pocket. I worked the rest of the shift with a measured calm, greasing brake pads and sharpening saw blades, while my mind replayed every silent sentence I'd swallowed. You'll cover it. Be grateful. Dead to me. Each one had sewn another stitch in the cage I'd built around myself. In the roar of the compressor, I heard my own pulse steady into indecision. I would not beg. I would not plead. I would simply leave. By the end of the afternoon, the shop's afternoon lull gave me time to text Ronan. 2 words, need couch. His reply, immediate, and without prying. Come now. I shut down the computers, unloaded tools, and walked out beneath a sky turning the color of bruised blue. Appropriate, I thought. I texted Mallory a single line. I'm done. No apology, no last-minute compromise. I wanted my words to echo in the kitchen where she would see them first. Walking the 3 blocks home, I felt a brittle calm settle around me. Each footfall on the cracked pavement sounded like freedom. When I reached the house, the front door was unlocked, as always. I stepped inside to the familiar hum of the refrigerator and the ghost of dinner dishes left soaking in the sink. Mallory stood at the counter, peeling carrots with meticulous precision. Trish lounged in the living room with a glass of red wine, head tilted back like a queen surveying a conquered kingdom. Conrad dozed in his recliner, eyes shuttered against an imagined sun. My blood chilled at their indifference, as if they'd been rehearsing this moment for months, waiting for me to emerge. I asked about the car sale, voice low. No response. I asked about the tuition demand. Trish's laughter, cold, brittle, filled the space. It's the least you could do for a family that took you in, she said, flicking her wrist. I didn't flinch. I gathered 2 duffel bags from my closet, clothes, toiletries, the few mementos that still belonged to me. Without uttering another word, I felt their eyes on my back as I walked through the corridor. Each step away, a reclaiming of the backbone they never bothered to notice I had. At Ronan's loft, the heater wheezes to life, filling the concrete room with a grainy warmth. The cat, a slender tabby with yellow eyes, jumped onto the mattress and curled against my side. I stared at the cracked window overlooking empty rooftops. Thesidy's pulse muffled at this height. For the first time that day, I allowed myself a long exhale. I pulled out my phone and disabled the auto payments for the mortgage my name covered, signed out of streaming services, removed my name from utility accounts and banking apps. Each tab felt like a stitch unpicked from a garment I'd worn too long. I didn't steal anything. They'd already convinced themselves of my disposability, but I withdrew my presence and funding from every online ledger they accessed. The backbone they never saw had slipped away. Night came, and with it, the first tremors of their panic. My phone vibrated with group chat hostility, Mallory's frantic messages, Trish's accusations, Conrad's threats. The Wi-Fi was down. They blamed the provider. Netflix was gone. They blamed the remote. The water bill missed. They blamed the city. None of their frantic text reached me. I watched them stumble in the dark because for once they had no manual, no account in my name to rescue them. As I lay on Ronan's stiff mattress, the cap purring against my shoulder, I felt a calm rage smoldering in my chest, a recognition that I had been both provider and prisoner, and now I was neither. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt unbound. The house where I'd bent myself into silent service now lay behind me, locked out by my own refusal. Tomorrow, I would watch the fallout I'd orchestrated simply by stepping away. But tonight, I was neither indebted nor confined. Tonight, it was just me and the quiet promise of a life reconstructed on my own terms. The sky had already turned that deep purplish-gray hue by the time I walked home, the kind of color that blurs the world like an old bruise. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from the weight of my duffel bags, but from the knowing I was walking back, not to a home, but to a house filled with people who had long since made it clear that I didn't belong. My boots scuffed the sidewalk, crunching little pebbles that had gathered along the curb. And with every stride, I repeated a single sentence in my head like a mantra. Don't argue. Don't explain. Don't bake. When I opened the door, the house was quiet, but not in that warm, comforting way you'd expect from home. It was a hollow quiet, the kind that makes your skin because it's too rehearsed. Like everyone inside had conspired to hold their breath, until I broke first. The hallway lights were on, casting a harsh glow on the photo frames lining the wall. Pictures of Mallory's family from birthdays, cookouts, vacations I wasn't invited to. There was one photo of me crooked on the edge of the shelf, partly obscured behind a scented candle that hadn't been lit in months. Fitting. I walked past it and into the kitchen. Mallory stood at the sink, washing dishes with so much force. I half expected the plates to crack under her hands. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, her expression unreadable except for the tightness in her jaw. She didn't look up. The faucet ran too loud, almost like she was trying to drown out my presence with the hiss of hot water and the scrape of steel wool. She wore the cardigan I bought her last Christmas, and for a moment, it stung to see it clinging to someone who could send a message like that and still move through the day unbothered. Her mother, Trish, lounged in the living room with a glass of red, wine balanced like a trophy in her hand, her legs crossed, one slipper dangling from her toes. The TV was on mute, some crime show flickering across the screen, casting pale light on her smug face. She glanced at me once, then back to her glass like I wasn't worth the full tilt of her attention. Conrad, her husband, was stretched out in their recliner. I shut, but not sleeping. He was listening. I saw the slight twitch in his eyelid every time the floor creaked. His chest rose a little too rhythmically, like he was pretending to nap just to avoid being part of the conversation. I dropped my bags beside the couch. The sound echoed in the silence. "Where's my car?" I asked, voice steady. No one answered. I stepped further in. "Mallory, where is it?" She scrubbed harder. Trish smirked into her wine and muttered, "You should be thanking us. That car was a luxury, notorite." I turned toward her. It was in my name. Trish rolled her eyes. But you used our driveway, our gas money, our insurance plan. What's yours is ours when you live under our roof. R.E. code, not bothering to mask the bitterness lacing my tone. Interesting math. Still no eye contact, just the soft clink of glass as Trish refilled her wine. I turned back to Mallory and the tuition or I intuition. She finally spoke, voice flat, as granite. He's family. You're not there. It was not wrapped in sarcasm or indirect jabs, just the truth. I was a placeholder, error source, a living wallet that could guilt and manipulate until I had the audacity to say no. I looked around the house. Every item I bought stood like a monument to my mistake. The Wi-Fi router I installed sat on the mantel. The smart TV I brought home last year glowed with a muted crime scene. The couch I carried up 2 flights of stairs now cradled Trish like a throne. My fingerprints were on everything. My name backed the bills, but my presence, it didn't matter. I nodded slowly, more to myself than anyone else. I walked into the bedroom and unzipped the bags I'd packed at Ronan's. I didn't unpack. I wasn't staying, but I reached into the drawer of the nightstand and pulled out a small manila envelope. It wasn't time for that yet, but I wanted to know it was still there. I slid it back carefully, then turned to the closet. I grabbed a few more shirts, my sneakers, a USB drive I kept stashed behind the bookshelf. Noon came in. No one asked where I was going. They were probably waiting for me to scream, to beg, to perform one last scene of loyalty, but I didn't. I zipped up the bags, walked back through the house, and paused by the kitchen door. Mallory finally looked at me. Her eyes weren't angry. They were blank. I paid for the car, I said calmly, and 100 other things. But don't worry, you'll figure it out. She opened her mouth like she was about to reply, but nothing came out. I stepped past her, my shoulder brushing hers ever so slightly. She flinched, not because I touched her, but because I didn't flinch in return. As I reached the door, Trish called after me. You're making a mistake. This is your family. I didn't even turn around. No, this was my silence, and you mistook it for consent. And just like that, I walked out, closing the door behind me. The air outside felt colder, but it was real. It didn't smother. It didn't judge. I could hear traffic in the distance, the bark of a dog, the rustle of leaves, sounds that didn't belong to them. They could have the house, the walls, the wine, and the control. I had something better myself, and that was more than they ever gave me credit for. Ronan's loft was a glorified garage with a slanted ceiling and windows that groaned in the wind. But when I stepped inside, it felt like a cathedral. Not because it was beautiful, far from it, but because it was mine in the way that matters. No judgment, nonchalant expectations waiting to be violated. Just a stained couch, a busted heater, and the distant sin of old oil. Ronan tossed me a spare key and a bottle of ginger ale. No questions, no pity, just a nod. Bathroom's down the hall. Cat's name is Mercury. He likes the top of your head. I chuckled, the sound strange in my throat. Good to know. I dropped my bags beside the couch, eased onto the cushions, and exhaled for what felt like the first time all year. Mercury jumped up minutes later, curled himself around the back of my neck like a scarf, and began to purr loudly, insistently. I didn't push him away. There was a strange comfort in the weight of something warm and living leaning into me, even if it was a cat with trust issues and a habit of licking hair. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. It was cracked and water-stained. Probably. From years of neglect, but it didn't stare back with disappointment or expectation. It didn't care that I wasn't where I was supposed to be. Some doting husband in Mallory's picture-perfect life. It just existed, honest in its brokenness. The quiet felt like a second scan, one I hadn't worn in years. I pulled out my phone, not to check in, not to explain, but to begin the work of unhooking. First, I logged into the mortgage portal. My name was on the payments because years ago, when Mallory had begged me to just help us get the loan, I had agreed without hesitation. I was the one with the credit, the one with the reliable job history. I disabled the auto-pay with a few taps. No dramatic exit, no final warning, just a quiet severing. Then came the streaming services. I logged out of every profile, changed the passwords, revoked access on every device. Disney Plus, Netflix, Spotify, all of it. I didn't do it out of pettiness. I did it because I finally understood that my presence in their lives had been transactional, a means to an end. I had become an invisible concierge, available 24/7. Next, I hid the utility companies: water, power, gas. I removed myself from every joint account. Mallory could call them if she wanted. They were in her zip code, not mine now. I didn't owe her another watt of electricity. As I worked, I started a spreadsheet. Not to guilt myself. Remember every bill I'd paid, every tuition fee I'd transferred, every emergency fund I'd coughed up for Orion, Trish, or Conrad. I listed dates, amounts, screenshots, not for them, formed to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy, that the sacrifices were real and the erasure was deliberate. By midnight, my eyes burned from the screen's glare. But I wasn't tired. I was wired, alert. I felt the way I imagine soldiers feel the first night after defecting from a war they never believed in. Not free, exactly. Not yet, but removed, distant, awake. Ronan came out around 1 a.m. in a worn hoodie, scratching his beard. "You need anything?" I shook my head. "Just clarity." He nodded like he understood, which was exactly why I'd called him and not someone else. "You got it. Take your time. Eats crap, but I got extra blankets. I'll be fine." He hesitated at the doorway. "You did the right thing. Leaving." I met his eyes. Even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts. He went back to bed and Mercury shifted to curl on my chest. Like a weighted question, I didn't want to answer. I laid back again and closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I listened to the sound of pipes clicking of the city far off humming with lives not entwined with mine. There was no drama here. No insults. Masquerading as love. No guilt draped in obligation, just space. The next morning, I woke to a dozen missed calls. Half from Mallory, half from her mother, one from Orion. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I made a cup-off coffee with Ronan's chipped French press, sat on the floor next to the drafty window, and sipped in silence. It was strange how easy it was to let go once the noise stopped. I had always thought love was supposed to be complicated, a constant negotiation. But what I'd lived through wasn't love. It was leverage. I was useful, not cherished. That morning, I drafted a few mails. One to the bank confirming my removal from any shared auto loans. One to the university's finance department requesting proof of the tuition payments I'd made for Orion. I wasn't burning bridges. I was documenting what I built. So, if anyone ever tried to twist history, I had my truth. Paper trails don't lie. I also sent myself a long message, a digital letter. It started with, "Remember why you left." Then it spilled out every little detail. The birthday they forgot. The anniversary is spent alone fixing their busted plumbing while they went wine tasting. The way Trish always called me the helper when company was over. The time Orion crashed my car and Conrad made me apologize for overreacting. I typed until my fingers scramped. I saved it in a folder titled Evidence of Self. By noon, Mercury had adopted me entirely. He followed me into the kitchen, onto the balcony, even to the bathroom door. He didn't ask for anything. He just showed up. Uncomplicated loyalty. I hadn't had that in years. I sat on the couch and stared at my phone, wondering if I should respond to any of the messages. Mallory had sent a voice note 17 seconds long. I played it on mute. Her face was still, just lips moving and eyebrows twitching, But I didn't am. I didn't care about the sound. I cared that she looked tired, not because she missed me, but because the engine had stopped. And I had been the engine the entire time. That's when it hit me. They weren't mourning me. They were mourning the convenience I had provided. They weren't panicking because they loved me. They were panicking because they had no passwords, no access, no fallback plan. They called it betrayal, but it was just absence. Mine. And they didn't know how to live without it. That night, I took a walk just a few blocks, hood up, hands in my pockets. I passed couples in cafes, a father pushing a stroller, an old man sweeping his stoop, lies moving forward. No one knew me. No one needed me to fix anything. It felt good. It felt like the beginning of something honest, something I didn't have to earn through silence. When I came back, Ronan had left a takeout container on the counter. A sticky note on top read, "Chicken Lane, you always like that crap." I smiled. It was more kindness than I'd received in months, and I hadn't had to bleed for it. It started with the Wi-Fi. Of course it did. The morning after I shut everything down, Mallory sent a group text. "Why is the Wi-Fi out?" No punctuation, no pleasantries, just a command disguised as confusion. I saw the message light up my screen while mercury stretched across my chest like a smug little alarm clock. I didn't respond, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wasn't their IT department anymore. Let them call the provider and explain why the bill bounced. Let them fumble with passwords I had memorized with accounts that were mine. I took a sip of the lukewarm coffee Ronan left on the counter and watched the storm begin. Within 10 minutes, Trish chimed in. "Netflix isn't working either. Is the router unplugged?" Then Orion, "I can't even check my school mail. Everything's offline. WDH is going on. They were unraveling and all I'd done was walk away. Another bus. Mallory again. What the hell did you do?" Still, I said nothing. I sat in Ronan's creaky desk chair, legs propped up, the cap purring against my shin, and scrolled through the endless thread of messages like I was watching a play I no longer had a role in. I'd played the provider for so long, I'd forgotten what it looked like to see them scramble without me. The illusion was cracking, and beneath it, their entitlement was laid bare. They weren't angry because they'd lost me. They were angry because they'd lost access. My phone buzzed again. "Mallory, direct message, this time. Why are you doing this? You're being petty." Ronan leaned back in his chair. "You're building peace now. Takes time. Messy start, but it gets quieter." I believed him, not because I had proof, but because the alternative was worse. Going back to that silence where I had to apologize for existing, for asking questions, for needing anything at all. Before bed, I checked the family group chat one last time. Trish had started copying and pasting old emails, trying to prove something, her authority. Maybe Conrad had gone radio silent. Mallory was now asking friends if anyone knew a good tech guy. They were trying to build what they had broken without me. And the truth, they wouldn't be able to because I wasn't just a participant. I was the structure, the admin, the quiet architect of their convenience. And now they'd have to learn how to live without the man they treated like furniture. I powered off my phone and slipped under the blanket Ronan had left on the couch. Mercury climbed up and nestled against my ribs, already purring like a lullaby. The heater kicked in with a reluctant groan. The lights bust. The city outside kept humming, unaware of the tiny revolution happening inside a garage-turned sanctuary. And I slept. Not with vengeance in my heart, but with something quieter. Absence. Let them feel it. Let them wonder. Because this time I wasn't coming back with an apology. This time, I was the one whole left, and I was finally okay with that. It started with Conrad of all people, the same man who once told me real men provide without keeping score had now taken to Facebook to air out his grievances like a teenager post-breakup. wrote, "Some people pretend to be family, but the second they don't get their way, they abandon everything. Ungrateful freeloaders have no place in a real home." It was vague, dramatic, and painfully ironic considering I was Theon who paid their electric bill for 14 months straight. But what really made me pause was the comment section because that's where Trish added her flourish. "We gave him everything," she wrote. "Asif, their passive tolerance and occasional Thanksgiving plate were some grand inheritance, as if I hadn't bled behind the scenes to keep their crumbling castle from collapsing. As if letting me sleep under their roof while I funded every square foot was a form of charity." Then someone replied, "Wasn't that car in his name?" 3 likes, then 6, then 12. The thread began to shift. The air, if you could feel it through screens, changed temperature. The narrative started to slip. I didn't say a word. Instead, I opened my files, the ones I compiled while they were too busy sipping wine and ignoring my presence. Digital folders labeled with meticulous timestamps. Mortgage autopays, tuition, ION, car coddle transfer, phone plan receipts. I had proof, not just stories or emotions. Cold, clean proof. I selected one document. The car title with my name listed as primary owner. Conrad's name signed beneath mine like a servant signing off a check he never cashed and forwarded it to my cousin Belle. Belle wasn't just family. She was the kind of person who didn't speak often, but when she did, people listened. She worked in compliance for a major bank and had a gift for being surgically precise with truth. I simply typed, "Drop this in the family. Chat." "No comment needed." She replied with a thumbs up. I muted the chat after that. I didn't need to see the explosion. My phone buzzed relentlessly that afternoon. 27 notifications, 17 from Mallory. I ignored them all. Ronan was on the porch, flipping burgers with that effortless confidence only a bachelor has when he's not trying to impress. He glanced at me and raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Detonation?" I nodded, setting my phone down like it was radioactive. Conrad had gone public with his grievances online, and I stayed silent. Ronan laughed, handing me a beer. "He's playing checkers." "You're writing the manual for chess." I took a slow sip, the bitterness grounding me. Mercury, the cat, lounged by the screen door, tail twitching with judgment like he had opinions on the unfolding drama. I let him out, and he curled up beside my boot, blinking at the sky like he owned it. That evening, texts started coming in. From Mallory's friends, not the close ones, but the distant acquaintances who used to send memes about queen behavior and cutting toxic men off. Now they were asking if I was okay. What happened? One even said, "I thought you guys were solid. Didn't know all that was on you." The cracks in Mallory's story were showing. Without my silent compliance, her carefully spun web unraveled. By 9 p.m., I caved and peeked at the family group chat, not to engage, just to watch. Belle had posted the title documents, clean and organized with the note, "Keeping it real." "No anger, no sides, just facts," Aunt Nan chimed in. "Wait, he paid utilities for a year and y'all kicked him out?" Uncle Vince followed with disbelief. Others joined in, memes about modern love and unappreciated effort spreading like wildfire. Mallory's last message was a desperate plea. "Why are you doing this to me? I didn't know it would go this far." Those words hit me harder than the rest. She knew. I just didn't think I'd act. She thought I'd keep playing the good soldier, saluting insults and marching through exploitation. She didn't count on me leaving quietly, with receipts. Ronan crashed on the couch beside me with a plate of greasy food and a cold soda. "You gonna respond?" "No. That's what they expect." Another speech, another olive branch. He nodded. "Better to let her sit in it, exactly. Let them feel the absence, the void of the man they used but never truly saw." That night, I backed up every file, screenshot, and message to a secure drive, not to wage war, but to preserve my truth. I wasn't erasing the past. I was archiving it for clarity, sanity, proof I wasn't a bitter dropout spinning lies on Facebook. Mercury curled between my ankles as the city hummed softly beyond the windows. I felt clean, for the first time in years. The next morning, before brushing my teeth, my phone buzzed. Orion. No. Hey, bro. Didn't ask for this. Dad said you'd handle it. Suddenly, I was bro again, only when the tuition bill bounced when warnings came. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I stood in front of the mirror, eyes clearer than before, the tiredness fading. Ronan cooked eggs and garlic in the kitchen. Want some? He asked. Yeah, I replied out of habit. I reread Orion's message. No questions, only expectation, that I would fix what broke. I remembered all I'd done for him, the drives, to college tours, the laptop I bought him, the nights I stayed up helping him study. Then I typed, maybe you should ask him why the guy who paid for your laptop, your phone, your dorm deposit got kicked out. Silence. Then, sorry, I didn't know. 4 words heavy with sincerity. Orion wasn't cruel or manipulative, just naive, raised in a house with no boundaries and optional gratitude. He hadn't known the man covering bills was slowly fading under their weight. I thought about replying, about forgiveness, but remembered Mallory's "you're dead to me" text and her silence afterward. So I put my phone down. Ronan handed me a plate of eggs and rice. You good? Define good, I said, but ate anyway. We sat in silence, an old kung fu movie playing softly in the background. I wasn't watching. I was still turning over Orion's words like a coin I couldn't spend. Later, I checked my backup folder, the PDFs of bank transfers, tuition payments, messages from Trish saying, just put it in your name for now. I sent a copy to my email, for the record. Not planning to use it, but keeping it close. A message popped up. Can we talk? I exhaled slowly and replied, I feel like I missed something big. That was the closest to self-awareness I'd seen from them. Maybe in another life I would have said yes, driven to campus, explained everything like the big brother who cleaned up messes. But that version of me was gone. So I wrote back, you didn't miss it. You ignored it. No reply came. I felt settled, not better, but at peace. Walked to the corner store for cat litter. When I returned, Ronan was fixing the heater with a wrench he barely knew how to use. I helped, and the warmth returned slowly, steadily. It reminded me of a love I never got from that house. Quiet, imperfect, real. That night, I left my phone untouched. It buzzed and flashed like a child begging for attention, but I didn't pick it up. I was done being their backup generator. Then, just after 7, came a knock that rattled the door like it owned the place. Ronan froze. You expecting someone? No. Another knock, louder, followed by a voice I knew too well. I know you're in there, Conrad. I didn't need to peek. That voice. The same one that called me son behind closed doors. The same one that turned ice cold when I said no. Ronan opened the door just enough to see Conrad, arms crossed like a sentinel. Conrad demanded a talk. Ronan didn't budge. I stepped out. The air was cool, the sky a bruised purple. Conrad accused me of punishing Mallory unjustly. I reminded him she sold my car and called me dead to her. He sneered, real men don't abandon their families. I shot back. Real men don't use others like ATMs with beating hearts. He stepped closer, trying to grab my shoulder. I flinched. He said the house was chaos, bills piled, Mallory unraveling, and demanded I come back. I replied calmly. You relied on me while treating me like I was expendable. I'm done being the silent paying ghost. His face darkened. We gave you a place to live. I carried the bills. I laughed, a sharp, bitter laugh that made Ronan step closer, ready. This isn't about fights. It's about being discarded. I removed myself. Now the rest is yours. Conrad. Clenched fists, puffed up, until Ronan warned, 10 seconds to leave my porch or I call the cops. Conrad stepped back, muttered, this isn't over, and left. I went back inside. Ronan locked the door. You good? Better than I was. I ate the cold meal Ronan made. No demands, no debts, just friendship. That night, I tucked away a manila folder I'd packed before leaving, the record of my time there, the unpaid sacrifices, the unseen labor. Ronan's phone buzzed the next morning. Found it, he said. Inside were messages, bills, receipts, and a letter. This is what I covered. This is who I was. This is why I left. I imagined Trish finding it first, expecting a tantrum but discovering a mirror she couldn't deny. Within minutes, my phone lit up with angry calls and texts, Trish screaming, Conrad throwing a chair. I leaned back, sipping coffee, knowing they had wanted honesty. Ronan smiled. Looks like you gave them some. The packet's truth spread like wildfire. Old family friends and distant relatives chimed in, calling out the entitlement they'd all ignored. Mallory finally broke her silence, pleading she never meant it to go this far. I thought he'd understand, she said. But the foundation of our relationship wasn't love or respect. It was expectation. I would always understand, always cover, always be the fallback. When I finally didn't, everything collapsed. Orion apologized too late. I didn't know. Dad said he'd handle tuition. Regret is no substitute for accountability. I watched the family scramble and realized I was no longer the invisible caretaker. The system shut down when I pulled the plug. Ronan told me, your ex's family is trending on Facebook. I saw Trish's angry posts and the viral spreadsheets I shared. It wasn't revenge. It was exposure. They'd built the fire. I stopped fueling it. And now they shivered in the cold. I was no longer the ghost husband, the unpaid laborer, the silent provider. I was free. That evening, watching a family laugh across the street, sharing simple warmth, I realized that's what I wanted. Real love, not performance. To have that, I had to stay gone. Sometimes, to reclaim yourself, you must leave. And let what you leave behind speak louder than words.